Russia has been bombing Kiev for days. The targets are not military facilities, but civilian infrastructure. Vladimir Putin even used his biggest trump card, Oreshnik, to plunge Ukraine into helplessness and darkness.
And we will strike there with Oreshnik and see what happens. We are ready such an experiment.
However, neither the Russian drone swarms nor Oreshnik could break Kiev's resistance. Kiev disrupted Putin's plans with its domestically produced FLAMINGO cruise missiles and Western Storm Shadows. The FLAMINGO missiles severed Moscow's energy bridges in a single stroke. Hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens were left in the dark and cold. The country was plunged into total panic. The epicenter of this panic is Oriol. The Oriol combined heat and power plant was hit. 225,000 civilians were left facing the threat of freezing. Footage of the attack encapsulated the drama of hundreds of thousands of civilians. The massive fireball seen in the videos indicates that the warhead carried by the drone targeted the turbine hall, one of the power plant's most critical components, or the high-pressure steam lines. A hit to such a point in a thermal power plant does not just mean the shutdown of that unit. It means the entire system goes into emergency mode, with pressure imbalances and a chain reaction shutdown. Here, we need to take a closer look at the technical anatomy of the FLAMINGO. Because this vehicle is not just a drone, it is a low-cost cruise missile. FLAMINGO is an advanced platform with a range of approximately 800 kilometers, powered by a small-scale turbojet engine. Capable of reaching speeds of 450 to 500 kilometers per hour, this system engages the target area in seconds, unlike traditional propeller-driven UAVs. FLAMINGO's body structure is made of composite materials that absorb radio waves. This gives it an extremely low radar cross-section. So, where was Russian air defense during the attack? That's the crucial question. Oriol is one of the most strategic hubs on the route to Moscow. Theoretically, it should be under a multi-layered air defense umbrella. However, these systems, known as FLAMINGO, have become the biggest nightmare for Russian air defense. This is because Russian air defense systems are designed to counter ballistic targets or conventional warplanes coming from high altitudes. However, these systems, which fly close to ground level, have low radar signatures despite being jet-powered, and lock onto single, valuable targets, roam around in the blind spots of Russian radars. Immediately after the attack, Oriol Governor Andrei Klitschko made statements indicating that they were trying to bring the situation under control, but he could not hide the truth. The governor was forced to admit that power had been cut off in the city's north and railway districts, and that infrastructure facilities had been damaged. This admission destroyed the Kremlin's "we've got everything under control" lie in that very moment. However, this devastated picture is not a coincidence or a sudden security lapse. In fact, it is the resurgence of a chronic nightmare for the Kremlin, because this is not the first time Oriol has been brought to its knees by FLAMINGO. On the night of November 13th, Ukraine launched its largest attack to date against the territory of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainian General Staff personally confirmed this brutal attack. Look, this is not a swarm of UAVs. Forget that. This is the first official mission of Ukraine's own FLAMINGO and BARS cruise missiles. And these weapons rewrote all the rules on the Russian map on the night of November 13th. Dozens of high-value military targets in occupied Crimea and Zaporizhia, command centers, massive fuel depots, and airports were reduced to ashes within hours. And while all this was happening, the massive thermal power plant in Oriol collapsed. Cities are in darkness, the people are in panic. Russian air defenses, those vaunted S-400s and Pantsirs, were completely ineffective against this new threat. At the moment of the attack, Oriol Governor Andrei Klitschko could not tell his panicked people to go to shelters, because there were no shelters. Instead, do you know what he said? Hide in the hallway, in the bathroom, in the closet. This is no joke. This is a Russian governor admitting the final outcome of Putin's 25-year promise of a strong Russia. On one side, confessions. On the other, threats. The regime's chief propagandist, Vladimir Solovyov, appeared on screen to hide the helplessness caused by the attack. Solovyov said that another Russian propagandist threatened the whole world with Russia's Poseidon nuclear torpedoes. Russia, unable to even stop the attacks, thought it could destroy Kiev. Vladimir Putin has relied on one thing for decades: Russia's infinite greatness. No matter how badly things went on the front lines, he believed that Moscow, St. Petersburg, and those critical industrial facilities and arsenals at the foot of the Ural Mountains were safe. Until November 13th, in a historic announcement, the Ukrainian General Staff played its game-changing cards: Flamingo, bars, Lyuty. These are Ukraine's own domestic products. This is the moment Putin's lie that the war will end if Western aid stops officially died. Flamingo has a range of 3,000 kilometers. This is not a simple technical detail. It means that every military base, every command bunker beyond Moscow, St. Petersburg, and the Urals is now a target. Putin thought he could destroy the war in Ukraine's cities. Now, the flames of that war are turning back toward his own capital. And these missiles weren't just designed to explode. Some were equipped with bunker-busting warheads capable of penetrating concrete up to 10 meters thick. Why is this information important? Because when we look at the targets struck on the night of November 13th, we see that this was not a terrorist attack, but a surgical operation. This was a decapitation operation, targeting Putin's generals, oligarchs, and warlords. This is a message sent to Moscow. The rules of war have changed. The war is no longer just on our territory. Now, nowhere is safe. And this is just the beginning. Indeed, President Zelensky said that serial production of these missiles will begin in January-February 2026. So, the nightmare Russia saw was just a preview. Until now, Russia believed that Ukraine could only conduct harassing fire with Soviet-era UAVs or modified missiles. Russian air defense systems were calibrated for these slow and easily detectable targets. On November 13th, they encountered cruise missiles that flew much faster, much lower, and were impossible to detect. And the result? A complete fiasco. The missile-like explosions reported by local residents in Oriol and the fiery debris raining down on residential areas, parking lots, and apartment courtyards. This proves that Russian air defenses could not stop the Flamingo, and perhaps only managed to strike it at the last moment, after it had reached its target, right above the city. The Telegram channel Supernova Plus confirmed that this debris belonged to Flamingo missiles. Instead of protecting its own people, Russian air defenses rained burning missile fragments down on its own citizens. So why was Oriol so important? The images show a huge hole in the main building of the Oriol thermal power plant, and the facility engulfed in flames. This not only plunged the civilian population into darkness, it also cut off power to nearby defense industry facilities, such as Orel Techmash. The Shahed launch base is the most important. Oriol is home to one of the main military bases from which Russian forces launch Iranian-made Shahed UAVs against Ukraine. It is reported that there are 8 ground launch pads at this base. So, by sending the Flamingo and UAVs to Oriol, Ukraine actually struck at the source of the terror. This is a symmetrical retaliation move that reverses Putin's energy war strategy and brings the war to Russia's doorstep. Putin launched 138 UAVs and an Iskander missile at Ukraine on the night of November 12th to 13th. Ukraine's response was to simultaneously destroy Russia's command centers, logistics, and terror bases. Putin's generals were at a loss as to what to do in the face of this complex attack. Ukraine's targeting of Russia's military and energy infrastructure with new weapons such as Flamingo is tantamount to pushing a giant that is already teetering. Because Putin's Russia is collapsing not only on the front lines, but also internally. The system is rotting from within, economically and socially. Let's look at the most concrete evidence of this. 500 million barrels of Russian oil stranded at sea. Ukraine's drone attacks in recent months have hit petrochemical plants like Orsk and Stavrolen so effectively that Russia can no longer process crude oil. According to Bloomberg, Russia has been forced to increase its exports, but there is no one to buy this oil. Currently, 500 million barrels of Russian oil are trapped in tankers in the oceans due to international sanctions and the inability to find buyers. This is a massive proof of how the main source of income financing Putin's war machine has been blocked. This is a logistical nightmare. Another factor that triggered this fiasco was the inadequacy of the interceptor aircraft protecting Moscow. These aircraft do not operate on water. Ukraine, meanwhile, continues its efforts to cut off the aircraft's fuel supply. Let us recall what happened on Christmas Eve. The wrath of Ukraine's Storm Shadow missiles and drones thundered in the skies over Rostov, Volgograd, and Krasnodar. Armored units defending Moscow, generators for air defense systems, and a significant portion of fighter jet fuel were supplied by the Rostov and Volgograd refineries. Ukraine's equation was simple. If the refinery burns, the fuel runs out. And it was all planned to be a systematic strangulation move to encircle Moscow. To understand the anatomy of this attack, we must first look to the sky. This operation was not an attack where a button was pressed and missiles were launched randomly. This was a daring and technically flawless ghost operation carried out by the Ukrainian Air Force. Data from the field and radar tracks confirmed that the attack was carried out using Storm Shadow missiles. These missiles are launched from the air, not from the ground. This means that Ukraine's Su-24M tactical bomber aircraft penetrated deep into Russian air defense territory, dropped their payload, and returned to base undetected. This situation represents a complete collapse scenario for the Russian aerospace forces. When we get into the technical details, the genius of the operation becomes clearer. Storm Shadow/Scalp EG missiles do not remain at high altitude after launch. They hug the terrain, flying in terrain-hugging mode, only 30 to 40 meters above ground level. Russia's impregnable S-300 and S-400 batteries were probably scanning the ceiling of the sky at the time, but death came from below the radar horizon, skimming the tops of the trees. The reporting of more than 12 explosions in strategic depth areas like Rostov is proof that Russia's layered air defense doctrine collapsed and that billion-dollar systems were indistinguishable from piles of scrap that night. The type of ammunition used here was also critical for the destruction of the target. Storm Shadow carries a 450-kilogram broach penetrator warhead. This warhead works in two stages. In the first stage, the penetrator charge pierces the refinery's outer concrete or steel armor. In the second stage, the main explosive detonates inside the facility. Ukraine did not fire its missiles randomly. They were directed with surgical precision at the refinery's most vital points, the distillation towers. Looking at the structure of the Novoshakhtinsk refinery, we see that the points hit targeted the atmospheric distillation units. These units are massive towers that separate crude oil and are the heart of the refinery. Without these towers, the refinery is just an oil storage facility and cannot produce anything. Ukrainian intelligence knew very well that repairing these towers would take months, even years. As a result, Moscow's billion-dollar defense myth was crushed that night by British-French engineering and Ukrainian courage. Even more critical are the aircraft. Russian Air Force sorties will have to decrease because this blue vein has been cut off. The deactivation of Novoshakhtinsk means a reduction in Russian pressure in Ukrainian skies, Russian pilots waiting on the ground, and Ukrainian soldiers catching their breath on the front lines. This is strategic strangulation. Russian jets will struggle to find the high-octane fuel needed to take off. Now, let's take a step back to see the whole picture. Let's analyze what these attacks mean for Russia's future, those invisible major impacts. Because it's not just about a power plant burning down. What was hit was the high-tech gas turbine, the heart of a modern thermal power plant. And this is where Russia's real nightmare, even bigger than Ukrainian missiles, begins. There is no backup for this turbine. Worse still, there is no one left who can produce or repair it. No Siemens, no General Electric, no Alstom. Putin's "we are self-sufficient" fairy tale falls silent helplessly in the face of this high-tech wreckage. Now let's explain this impossibility with a little technical depth so that it becomes clear how Russia has fallen into a trap. A gas turbine is one of the most complex machines in the world. It consists of thousands of parts manufactured with micron-level precision, rotating at temperatures of thousands of degrees and at speeds exceeding the speed of sound. The modernization of Russia's energy infrastructure took place in the early 2000s, during the honeymoon period of relations with the West. At that time, Russia equipped all its critical power plants with turbines from German Siemens and American General Electric. In other words, the DNA of the machines producing Russia's electricity was Western. However, when the war began and sanctions were imposed, these giant companies packed their bags and left. Not only did they leave, but they also cut off maintenance software, service teams, and, most importantly, spare parts supply. This is precisely why the Flamingo attack in Oriol is deadly. If a missile had hit an old turbine from the Soviet era, Russian engineers would have found rusty parts in storage, patched up the system somehow, and got it running. But Ukraine hit that sensitive modern unit, which runs on Western technology. The blades of this unit are made of special alloy metals and ceramic coatings. Russia's domestic industry does not possess this metallurgical technology. For years, they have been trying to do reverse engineering, that is, to copy Western parts, but it doesn't work. Because the copied part does not withstand heat as well as the original, it does not maintain balance, and within a few weeks, it breaks down and destroys the entire system. In other words, Russia has lost the ability to repair the machines that generate its own electricity. So, the question on everyone's mind is, won't China help? This is where it gets tragically comical. The Kremlin was appeasing its people by saying, if the West leaves, the East will come. But in engineering, there is a problem called compatibility. The entire infrastructure of the Oriol power plant, the pipelines, the control room, the digital brain, was built according to Siemens standards. You can't just bring in a Chinese turbine, say a Shanghai Electric product, and install it here. The dimensions don't match, the connection points don't match, the voltage regulation doesn't match. It's like trying to put a Samsung battery in an iPhone, but on an industrial scale. To install a Chinese turbine there, they would have to demolish almost the entire plant and rebuild it from the ground up. That would mean a construction process lasting not months, but years, and billions of dollars in additional costs. Moreover, China is still hesitant to provide its most advanced technology to Russia for fear of possible secondary sanctions. This situation had pushed Russia into a painful process known as cannibalization. In other words, to keep a working power plant running, they were dismantling parts from another plant. But the Flamingo attack broke this cycle too. Because the missile destroyed the main body, not the part, there was no machine left to dismantle or install. That crater in Oriol is the grave of Russia's technological isolation. Moreover, Russia is now being drawn into an inflationary spiral and economic paralysis. Energy is the lifeblood of the economy. Cutting off energy in industrial centers like Oriol and Rostov means supply shocks. A turbine may cost perhaps $50 to $100 million. But every day that turbine is not working, the damage it causes to the Russian economy, with factories in that region shutting down, railways disrupted, and production collapsing, amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars. When factories don't work, product shortages begin, and shortages cause prices to skyrocket. The Russian people, already struggling with the devaluation of the ruble, will now face hyperinflation in basic food and industrial products. Putin's thesis that the war economy is running smoothly evaporates amid the smoke of burning power plants. Factory workers left unemployed, civil servants unable to receive their salaries, and a population unable to heat their homes. This triple combination has always ignited the fuse of revolutions or major social explosions throughout history. The second, and perhaps most frightening effect for Putin, the collapse of the elite's sense of security. For Russian oligarchs and political elites, Moscow and its surroundings were a bubble, isolated from the war and untouchable. They watched the war on television, sipping champagne. However, the Flamingo and Storm Shadow attacks showed that the war had now reached their backyards, their dachas, their luxury villas, and their investments. If Putin cannot even protect a strategic point like Oriol, who can guarantee the safety of the elites in Moscow? Capital is cowardly. These attacks will accelerate the flight of Russian capital from the country and weaken the bonds of loyalty within the Kremlin. The question, why remain loyal to a leader who cannot protect us, is now being whispered more loudly behind closed doors. Third is the geopolitical domino effect. Russia's biggest ally, China, is watching this unfold with great attention and probably some hidden disappointment. For Beijing, Russia was supposed to be a powerful tank to keep the West busy. But a Russia that can't even protect its own energy infrastructure from simple drones, with air defense systems full of holes, is an unreliable partner for China. Xi Jinping does not like to invest in a weak ally. These images of weakness are destroying Russia's image as a superpower in Asia and the global south. Even deploying North Korean soldiers to the front lines is not enough to stop this technological and logistical collapse. In the eyes of its allies, Russia is no longer a feared bear, but a wounded and bleeding prey. The final outcome is a complete strategic failure for the Kremlin. Putin's Oreshnik, launched to intimidate the world, failed without changing any balance on the ground. However, Ukraine's flamingos managed to puncture Moscow's energy arteries. Russia's impenetrable air defense wall collapsed in the face of Kiev's new trump card. But this is not the end, only the beginning. The data and intelligence reports coming from the field are clear. Ukraine has ramped up production of these massive jet-powered missiles to maximum capacity. The few flamingos arriving today will become an unstoppable swarm in Moscow's skies tomorrow. The lights are going out for Russia, and it seems that this storm is just beginning. So, what do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay informed about PPR Global's new analyses. Thank you for choosing us.